Today's Locked On Bucks, a very, very strange day for the Milwaukee Bucks, who are snowed out in New Orleans. No word yet on their game tomorrow against the Miami Heat. And of course, the rumors that continue to swirl. So, a newsworthy day that we will try to get you caught up on coming up next here on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, as we're here to break down the latest in a very eventful day for the Milwaukee Bucks. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day each and every day. And to all of those of you who have subscribed to the Locked On Bucks newsletter as well, if you have not done so yet, you can do so for free at lockedondaily.com and get your day started with the all-new and free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So we are live here to get to your reactions as the Bucks game has officially been postponed and snowed out in New Orleans. You kind of sensed this was coming, and some communication I had with members of the travel party that are down there in New Orleans, seeing some of the images that they shared. You started to wonder, is this game going to be played? Bucks are not out of the woods yet for tomorrow. So I want to touch on that. And obviously the big story that has been attached to this team is the trade yesterday that the Phoenix Suns made to basically take $1 and turn it into 3 quarters, taking their unprotected 2031 first-round draft pick, turn that into 3 future first-round picks that are going to be at the back end of the draft. But nonetheless, it is 3 first-rounders that the Suns have. So 3 assets you can attach in a move for potentially Jimmy Butler, as those rumors have not gone away. We're going to carve out some time for that because I think there's a lot of things to keep in mind, some very important ones, once we start to get into the trade salary cap, what the second apron means, what the Bucks would have to do in terms of money that they send out, and anything else going forward. So we'll get to that the back half of the show. But there is no game tonight. As Camille and I were planning on having a post-game show, it was actually going to be Camille and Frank handling a post-game show tonight, and that was going to be your show tomorrow for Thursday morning. Of course, we learned at about 10:30, 11 o'clock this morning, the game is postponed. So I've seen a lot of people question, why is this game postponed? Why didn't the Bucks wait to travel? So New Orleans got hammered with about 10 inches of snow. And while we in Wisconsin and the Midwest are used to that and more equipped to handle it, they are not in New Orleans in terms of snow removal. The entire city is essentially shut down. I've seen photos and videos from those that are out there in New Orleans and what it's been like for them. So the Bucks left to go to New Orleans Monday late morning, early afternoon. They would typically leave for New Orleans Tuesday afternoon for a Thursday game. They went a day early because of this storm, and it turned out that the storm was much worse than anticipated. So they have been basically holed up in the hotel for 3 days now. They were supposed to have a practice on Tuesday at, I believe, Tulane. That practice was canceled because there was no way to travel there. They were supposed to have a shoot around this morning. That was canceled because there was no way to get to the arena other than by on foot. And that's when it started to pick up of, is this game going to be played? So New Orleans has just been pulverized with snow. It's the reason why this game is postponed. And now it leaves tomorrow's game in serious doubt as well against the Miami Heat, because as of this moment, and we're live right now, so as of 3:05, the Bucks have still not left to come back to Milwaukee. It is going to be a challenge getting out of the hotel, out of airports. All flights have been shut down, leaving and coming into New Orleans for the day. So that is going to present a major challenge. And while the Bucks have had instances, and every team for that matter has had instances of, say, a back-to-back where you're arriving home or you're arriving in the new city where you're playing on the second consecutive night at 2 a.m, sometimes around there, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. It is certainly not ideal, but also keep this in mind. if the Bucks do not leave New Orleans, like I've seen people question, man, is this going to be a case of the Bucks arriving home the day of a game and playing that game? I don't see that happening. So if the Bucks are not able to leave New Orleans in the next let's say 4 or 5 hours here, I think tomorrow's game is going to be postponed as well, because as I just mentioned, the schedule and the timeline of events for the Bucks, they played Sunday night. They went through a bit of team activities, I'll say Monday morning, and then they fly to New Orleans. So from Monday afternoon on, there's been no physical basketball activity. They were supposed to practice Tuesday. That was canceled. They were supposed to have a shoot around today. That was canceled. So if you arrive home, let's say 2 a.m., 3 a.m., something like that, that's where you get cleared to fly back. I just have a hard time seeing that game being played because of the lack of physical activity for the Bucks to go from not playing a game since Sunday and not doing much of anything since then to, oh, by the way, you're playing this game now on let's say 15 hours notice, 15 hours of rest. So keep an eye on reports coming out of, hey, are the Bucks still in New Orleans? Have they left yet? Because that's probably going to determine whether or not the Bucks are able to play that game tomorrow night against the Miami Heat, which carries its own level of significance and intrigue because of the obvious, the elephant in the room, and the Jimmy Butler and those rumors that have really intensified and started to circulate in the past few days. We'll get to that in a second, but what I would just say is there's no makeup date announced yet for this Pelicans game. And again, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but if the game tomorrow is postponed as well, you got 2 games that you're going to have to squeeze in there somewhere and make up basically for the Bucks. It is significant for this reason. The Bucks have played 41 games right now. You look at the rest of the Eastern Conference. The Cavs have played 42. The Celtics have played 43. The Knicks have played 45 games. The Pacers, 43 games. Hawks, 42 games. Pistons, 43 games. Like on and on and on. You're seeing these teams that have played that many games. It's the Charlotte Hornets that have only played 39 games. Other than the Hornets, no team has played fewer games than the Bucks have this season. And I point that out because we're at the midpoint and you're among the fewest games played in the league. So you're going to have to make that up on the back end. And if you're now saying, look, you're already going to have more games than most in the final stretch of the season, now we're going to have to find at least 1 game to squeeze in there, potentially 2. It's going to start to get challenging for one of the oldest teams in the league that has among the most back-to-backs in the league, and a lot of those are coming late in the season. Now this means there's going to be even more, because the way to make these games up, or this game up, if it's just one, is you got to find the pockets on the schedule where the Bucks have 2 days off in between games. And there are just 3 of those instances right now. So again, getting ahead of ourselves here, but let's say tomorrow's game against Miami is postponed. You have 3 instances from now until the end of the season where you have 2 days off in between games. In all 3 of those, the schedule doesn't line up with the New Orleans Pelicans. So to reschedule that game with New Orleans, it's going to have to be a third team. There is going to have to be a third team involved, similar to what the league has already done, I think, with the Hornets. But some of the games that we saw scheduled, a week, 10 days ago, because of, number one, the wildfires in Southern California, and a similar event, the ice storm that hit Atlanta, you saw 10 games being rescheduled, and not all of those were clean reschedules because of what we just said with the Bucks schedule and how it doesn't line up perfectly with New Orleans. So what you had to do then is look at Pelicans games and say, okay, where do they have 2 days off around games? And can we look at the front end of that or the back end of that and say, this game that was going to be played on Tuesday, we're going to bump this up to Monday, and then the Bucks are coming to New Orleans and they're playing you on a Tuesday. So that's likely what's going to happen with New Orleans. If that Miami Heat game is postponed as well, I think the most logical date that makes sense is next Thursday, because the Bucks are off Wednesday, Thursday next week. Miami plays the 29th. They don't play again until February 1st. The Bucks would then have a back-to-back and make up that game against the Heat next Thursday, go to San Antonio to play the Spurs on Friday, and the Heat would be in a similar spot. So again, we're getting way down the road there. We don't know that tomorrow's game against the Heat is going to be postponed as well. I would say it's 50-50 at best at this point that game gets played because, again, the Bucks are still in New Orleans as we sit here and record this. So keep an eye on that, and we'll probably have an answer by the end of the night if that game is going to be played tomorrow or if that is going to be postponed as well. And then, again, for a team that's only played 41 games, it becomes a matter of trying to make up 2 games down the stretch of the season when you've already got a number of games crammed into just a very, very brief window here for the Bucks. Okay. I know what most of you probably came here for is those rumors, and you saw the thumbnail with today's episode and the player that was included on the thumbnail. So let's get to that. Let's rip the Band-Aid off and have the discussion about the trade rumors that continue to intensify about the Bucks, the Miami Heat, the Phoenix Suns, Jimmy Butler, and Bradley Beal. We'll get into that conversation next year on Locked On Bucks. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by GameTime. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy, WWE as well. I got tickets booked for one game next Thursday, or for one event next Thursday. So hopefully that game, if it's canceled, is not made up next Thursday. But some of my favorite memories in this past year were attending sporting events and concerts, and I did that with the help of GameTime. GameTime has now made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, GameTime Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was looking for tickets to an upcoming comedy show next Thursday night in Madison. Fingers crossed I can still use that. And I use the GameTime app because with GameTime Picks, I found amazing deals and could even see the view from my seat before buying. The super deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDON, NBA, for $20 off your first purchase. Download GameTime today. What time is it? GameTime. All right, what you all came here for, the trade rumors that have started to pick up here, and there's been a number of sourced reporting on this subject. I do find it funny that Camille and I were talking about this earlier today as well. All it took was a specific trade rumor for Chris Middleton to suddenly have 100% approval rating among Bucks fans. But the Phoenix Suns, the trade that we mentioned that they pulled off yesterday, it's still, I mean, to say it's mortgaging your future is an understatement, but they trade their 2031 pick, unprotected, first round pick, unprotected. And look, we've talked about the Bucks 2031 first round pick. I don't think it should be off the table in the right deal. The loyalty that Giannis has given you, and again, in basically giving you no indication to believe he's going to look elsewhere or request any type of move so long as you remain competitive or are doing everything that you can to stay on that level. That to me means, look, we got to do whatever we can to stay there. That 2031, if that's the last asset we have to trade, fine. If the move makes sense, we will trade that. I think that's the approach that the Bucks have to take. I think the Phoenix Suns are a little different because, number one, it isn't that homegrown star player. I know you have Devin Booker, but the Bucks have won a championship, and the Bucks have continued to go all in to make these moves. The Bucks have also started to develop some young players. I'm not going to say that Andre Jackson Jr. or AJ Green or any of those players, Ryan Rollins, who we all love, are all-star caliber players, but you're starting to find the right mix of Giannis, Damian Lillard, and some of these young guys that you have started to develop here. That is not at all the case in Phoenix. And while there are similarities with the makeup of the roster, the age of the two teams, the assets that they certainly lack, both the Bucks and the Phoenix Suns, I do believe they're in different spots, in that the Bucks are in a better spot than the Phoenix Suns. Like if you're Phoenix, you know, it's the same conversation a lot of people were having about the Bucks earlier this season through the first 10 games of, hey, is it time to start trading away some of these assets and recoup some things and start the rebuild now? Again, so long as Giannis is on the team, the answer to that is always going to be no. It is not the time to start the rebuild. I don't know that that's the case with Phoenix. Like it's starting to become more of a sample size that feels like this just doesn't work. And maybe it is time to see what can we get for a Kevin Durant? What can we get for a Devin Booker? Bradley Beal is a little more complicated. We'll get to that in just a second here. But that's not what the Phoenix Suns are going to be doing. And the move that they made yesterday to turn a 2031 unprotected first-round pick when, again, the chances are Kevin Durant is not going to be on that team. Devin Booker is probably not going to be on that team. Bradley Beal is not going to be on that team when you get to 2031. It might be a really good draft pick, and it's unprotected that you sent out to Utah for 3 first-round picks. You don't make that type of move if the thought is, I think we can get something here. Like, I think we can take these 3 assets and turn it into something. You make that move when you know you have something lined up and you've already started to go down that path and you found out, okay, this is what it's going to take. So let's split the baby here and turn this dollar into 3 quarters where we can give this team 2 quarters and we can give this team 1 quarter as well as the rest of the salary. So I do think something is imminent here. Now, why we're having this discussion is Sam Amick of The Athletic, a few others as well. Bobby Marks has talked about this. Nate Duncan and Danny LaRue have talked about this. The Bucks keep getting mentioned in this trade. And it was Sam Amick who said, look, the intel that I'm hearing is, a Jimmy Butler trade. It wouldn't be Butler going to Milwaukee. This was before the Suns trade even happened. It wouldn't be Jimmy Butler going to Milwaukee. The Bucks would be a part of that deal, and they would be the team that would end up with a Bradley Beal. Now, Amick has also said Zach LaVine is a name that's getting discussed as well. Look, kind of what I said before. As long as Giannis is on the team, I think you have to explore every single scenario. I don't know about the fit. Bradley Beal would give you something you don't currently have on the roster. I think that is for sure. The fit, though, is the interesting part. And I think there's a couple of things to look at. Number one is the contract. You would, in making this move, have 3 players that are making in the mid-50s to $60 million for at least the next 2 seasons. So you don't make this trade unless you conduct the second apron. But having said that, in doing so, you're going to be pushing yourself right back up against it, basically annually, as long as this trio is together. So again, it creates even more importance on AJ Green continuing to play like this. Andre Jackson continuing to take a step forward. Ryan Rollins, even other guys, maybe a Chris Livingston. But the caveat to all of it is this to keep in mind. Let's say there's a Bradley Beal trade that involves him going to the Bucks. It's always a tough and a delicate spot for me to get into these personnel type of discussions, given that I am employed by the team. But let's say there's a deal where Bradley Beal comes to the Bucks. That is just over $50 million. So the Bucks would have to essentially shed $58 million because the goal in any trade that you make, and Camille and I have talked about this before too, is look, when you're this close to getting out of that second apron, you got to exhaust all resources to get there because of what it means in terms of, what you can do down the road. So case in point, just a couple of days ago, you started to see reports of, hey, if the Raptors can't find a trade that they like for Bruce Brown, sounds like he'll be bought out and then, is on the open market to sign with any team. Bucks can't sign Bruce Brown if they're in the second apron because you can't sign any player that's making above the mid-level exception. So that takes that off the table. All you have to use are veteran minimum contracts in the offseason. We saw it worked well for the Bucks this offseason. It's not going to work well all the time. So you have to be cognizant of that. Pick freezing. And there's so many things that in audio and video podcast is probably not the forum for this. It's probably best to be written out where you can see all this, but freezing picks. So if you're in the second apron again, your 2031 pick that we talked about the value there, that becomes frozen and it's not unfrozen. So you can't move it until you cleanse yourself and get out of the second apron, I believe 2 out of 3 years. So it behooves the Bucks and any team to get out from under the second apron. So number one, keep in mind, if the Bucks do something, anything they do, the number one goal is get out of the second apron because of what that opens up for you. So let's just say this trade that's been kicked around a lot and everybody's taken it and run with it. You can do the math and you can piece together the contracts. There's obviously the 3 big ones that a lot of Bucks fans targeted in the offseason. Again, I don't really feel comfortable listing the names given my role with the team, but you can find it. You would need a 4th player. You would need another minimum contract in there. And that would get you to about $58 million that is sent out for a deal that would bring in Bradley Beal. So it would get you under the second apron and clear enough salary there, but it would also be a 4-for-1 deal. Now, it's not going to be, there is not going to be another player coming back to the Bucks in that trade. So it's not just, okay, give us this player as well because of the cap implications. And because take anything else back, it's going to get you very close to getting to the second apron once again. So you would have to sign 2 minimum contracts. And the good news, and I'm still waiting on clarification of what that figure is exactly, reaching out to Bobby Marks, but it's prorated because of its spot in the season. I would assume Ryan Rollins gets upgraded, and that is one of those. And that's kind of killing 2 birds with one stone. You don't have to worry about him and his status in the offseason. It fills out one of those 2 open spots that you have because Ryan Rollins is on a 2-way contract. And then somebody else. Now, again, if you're under the second apron, that could be a buyout candidate that you could sign that player to fill out your second spot. I would also caution, look, it's a pie in the sky to say, hey, you can clear all this and get under the second apron. And the Raptors might not find a trade for Bruce Brown, and they cut him, buy him out, and you could sign him. A lot of things have to happen for that to be the case. And also, the Bucks found success with Marvin Williams in the buyout market. That is a rarity. Guys are being bought out for a reason. So you can't pin your hopes on that. I don't know that there's anything imminent involving the Bucks or that anything is going to happen. I do think the Bucks are going to make a move because of what we just said of how close they are to getting out from under that second apron. And I would just say, look, if my experience in this league has taught me anything, it is that where there's smoke, there's fire. And we're starting to hear a lot of this. The reports coming out of Phoenix too. John Gambadoro, who is one of the more connected sources out of the Valley, saying the Bucks were one of those teams that Bradley Beal said I would waive my no trade clause for. So I don't know that it's imminent with the Bucks in terms of the next couple of days. I do think something is imminent with the Phoenix Suns. What that means for this team remains to be seen. And the other reports, and I know we're going pretty long here. This was intended to just be a bonus 10 or so minute show, but certainly an eventful day here. I don't know how it works with Zach LaVine. Now, certainly that would be more palatable for the Bucks because he's making less money than Bradley Beal. There's no trade clause to worry about either. I believe the years are shorter. I think Zach LaVine's fit next to Damian Lillard and Giannis would be a good one. But my only hesitation in any move like that, it's not to single out Zach LaVine or Bradley Beal or any player that the Bucks have been linked to. My main hesitation is we saw last year what drastically changing your team meant and how much time it took to kind of find your footing. So I do want to finish that point coming up in just a second here as we'll start to wrap up the show. I'm seeing a lot of comments too. We haven't addressed all the comments, a ton of you guys joining this impromptu show that we've put together here. So I do want to start to go through and address some of these comments as well, but finish off that point about what this does at this point in the season, making a move like that, where it's not just bringing in a role player, it's dramatically reshaping your team and what that could potentially mean. So we'll finish off with that conversation and see where else this takes us coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. All right, so the point there, it took time last year for Giannis and Damian Lillard to find that chemistry. I mean, you could argue carried into this season, and not just Dame learning his new teammates. I remember talking about this a number of times. The year the Bucks won the championship, when 50% of their roster was new. It's not just, in that case, Drew Holiday and Bobby Portis and those types of guys. It's not just them. Bryn Forbes, the flamethrower, right? It's not just them learning their new teammates. It is every single one of your teammates learning that player or those players. Where does he like to get the ball? Where should I look for the ball? How do I play off of this guy? Things like that. That's what it impacts. And that to me is the most dangerous part about this, because of how close you are to the finish line of this season, to the fact that, look, it's not to say the Bucks don't need improvement and can't get better, but I think you really feel good about where this team is starting to head, the consistencies that we've seen. Camille and I have talked about it quite a bit. The defense is here to stay, right? They've been a top 10 defense through the first 41 games, and that includes the disaster that was a 2-8 start in your first 10 games of the season. So the defense is held up. And, we talked about this the other day too. What's the bigger surprise? That the Bucks defense has bordered on elite this season, the same group that was, ranked 23rd at the time of your coaching change last year and was consistently in the bottom half of the league. Is that the bigger surprise, that the defense has been this good, or that the offense still hasn't cracked the top 10? Yesterday's show, if you missed it, or this morning's, I should say, we went through and looked at all of the offenses that have won championships in years past, because so much gets made about the defense and where the defense needs to rank. You got to be a top 10 defense or you're not going to compete. The reality is you got to be a top 10 offense too. That I think we found 3 teams in the last 20 years that were outside of that figure that won an NBA championship. So it's important that the Bucks offense continues to make those strides, and it doesn't come at the expense of the defense. When you look at those 2 names, you would assume it's going to help your offense and it's going to boost your offense. But again, at what cost does that mean for your defense? What does it mean if you have a player that's going to struggle defensively in that guard spot, playing next to Damian Lillard? So these are the questions I don't have answers for, that I'm sure, assuming that the Bucks are in fact involved in some of these discussions, that I'm sure they're kicking around themselves here. But it is very interesting that these rumors started to spread like wildfire. And you go back weeks ago when, the Jimmy Butler name was first mentioned, and Bucks fans, even back then, were talking about, do we really want Jimmy Butler on this team? And now you get to the, hey, it's sounding like it's going to be potentially Bradley Beal. And the fact that it's almost been unanimous among all Bucks fans, and just looking through the comments here on this show as well, and thoughts that you guys are leaving here, it's almost unanimous that people don't want Bradley Beal on this team, and that maybe this is what it took, like one by one. Maybe this is all it took for Chris Middleton to finally get the adulation and respect that he deserves. But this has really touched a nerve. So this was the reason why I did, and I can assure you, Charlie, I do not have any inside intel on this. It's just reading some of the tea leaves here and starting to see what's happening. But this is why I felt like we needed to do something today, because you have a game postponed. We will potentially have a second game postponed tomorrow as well. So again, we'll know more about that later this evening or early tomorrow morning. But the Bradley Beal rumors that just would not die and have really started to pick up for this team. Seen a lot of the feedback and the vitriol at that on social media. It feels like you guys really have something you want to say and get this off your chest about Bradley Beal. So I felt like we needed to get something out there here with all these reports that have been starting to pick up more and more and more. We are just over 2 weeks away from the trade deadline. And, you look back last year, what were the biggest names that were moved? Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. Those were the biggest moves that were made, and those weren't even at the deadline. Those were both January, December, I believe, was the OG move. So I think that's another piece of what we're seeing now with this new CBA that's making it difficult because, we just spent time talking about the second apron, what that means for the Bucks and any team that are in it. I mean, even in the offseason, why I always kind of thought, as much as Miami wants to play a game of chicken here and say, look, tough, we still call the shots here, Jimmy, and we don't want Bradley Beal. We don't want this move. So you're staying here. You could call his bluff and say, fine, decline your player option, go sign with the Brooklyn Nets or somebody that has the cap space, but those teams are not good teams, or else you're stuck here and pick up your option and we'll figure it out from there. It's not a great spot to be in. You want to recoup something for your assets. And we talked about it before in previous free agencies with guys like Chris Middleton and Malcolm Brogdon. When we went through those discussions of let this player leave and because of where you are in terms of your cap, you're not just getting $20 million to use. So that's the difficulty in those spots. But what makes it even more difficult for teams like the Miami Heat is that apron talk, and that, people saying, do a sign and trade. Great. Well, then you're hard capped at the first apron. This is part of the CBA. I am hopeful if there's a move that is made here and it's, let's say, a 4 or 5 team deal, because that's what it's going to take to get this across the finish line. I'm hopeful the Bucks can get an asset back as well. I don't think it's going to be the case, but let's just say Miami now has 3 first-round picks. Okay, great. If we're taking this contract with the no trade clause, we're getting one of those first-round draft picks as well. So if you can start to do that, I'd be curious to see if Bucks fans would change their tune a bit, or if it would be quite as much of a hard no as a lot of people. I mean, look at all the comments that we've gone through one by one here, that it is not a very high approval rating that we're seeing for any potential move for the Bucks to acquire a player like Bradley Beal or Zach LaVine. But the hope is, can you get something else too? If the Bucks are in fact involved in this, can you get one of those draft picks? And again, those first round picks that the Phoenix Suns created basically out of thin air, all it cost them was their future. Their first round picks in name only, right? It's this summer's first round pick. That's the worst between the Cavs, the Timberwolves, and I think the Jazz. It's probably going to be the 30th pick in the draft. 2027 is the same scenario. Cavs look like they figured it out, and they're at least going to be, a good regular season team, as we saw from the Bucks early in the Bud tenure. You're getting the 25th pick in the first round for each of those 3 years. So it's a first round pick. It's not a great one. But even then, you can't get hung up on where the pick falls in the first round because of the stepping rule and what it means for, okay, if you get one of those picks back, it means one of your own picks is available, or you could pick swap again, which again, the Bucks can't do any of that until 2031. So if they are in fact involved, that is my absolute hope, is there's some other type of asset that is coming back to Milwaukee in the interim here, but remains to be seen. It is certainly going to be a very, very interesting 2 weeks here. February 6th is the trade deadline. So 2 weeks from tomorrow is when we will have that deadline, and maybe we'll have more news to react to on our show tomorrow. Again, there won't be a post-game show. Camille and I are planning on doing a show live tomorrow morning, probably around 8 a.m. Central Time, to see if there are any further developments from this, get Camille's thoughts on those trade rumors and anything else that develops between now and tomorrow morning. Again, are the Bucks going to play tomorrow? We'll have, we think, an answer on that as well. But the point of this, recap an interesting day with one game postponed, potentially another, and all of those trade rumors that have continued to circulate involving the Bucks. So just wanted to put some out there. Hopefully this wasn't incoherent rambling. A ton of interaction, a ton of you guys jumping into the live show as well. We greatly appreciate that. One more live show tomorrow. And I mean, who knows? We might have another one Friday if there is no post-game show tomorrow night to react to. But that's it for today. I just wanted to touch on everything that has developed here in the past, 24, 36 hours for the Bucks and get some type of fix out there since there is no Bucks game tonight. So we figured we'd give you some type of content to react to. Once again, tomorrow, we're going to do another live show in the morning, 8 o'clock, Camille and I. So she'll share her thoughts on the latest from this Jimmy Butler saga, Bradley Beal, etc. And we should know if that game against the Miami Heat, Rivals Week, by the way, the Bucks rival, the rivalry game, if that is going to be played tomorrow night at Fiserv Forum or not. So that comes your way tomorrow morning if you want to join us again for the live show. Otherwise, the podcast will be uploaded sometime around 9 o'clock in the morning, and same with the YouTube show. That'll do it for today, though. Tons of great interaction and feedback from you guys with your thoughts. Leave your thoughts in the comments as well. I already know it seems like it's going to be overwhelmingly negative that you do not want this rumored trade to take place, but leave your thoughts on the trade and why you would do it, why you would not do it. And we'll get to some of those comments on tomorrow morning's show as well. That'll do it, though, for this impromptu show. We will catch up with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.